The stars had always called to humanity. For thousands of years, people had looked up at the night sky and dreamed of traveling among those distant lights. In the year 2089, that dream finally came true. Humanity built its first colony ships and sent 14,000 brave souls toward a new world. They never arrived. Admiral Park was only 7 years old when his grandfather first told him the story of the burning. The old man had been a young engineer back then, working at the space station that watched the colony ships leave Earth. He remembered the cheering, he remembered the hope, and he remembered the silence that came 3 days later when alien warships appeared from nowhere and turned those 14,000 people into dust. The aliens called themselves the Galactic Assembly, 12 ancient species who had ruled the stars for millions of years. They had been watching Earth for a long time. They had seen humanity's wars, its nuclear weapons, its endless violence, and they had made a decision. Humanity was too dangerous to be allowed among the stars. They built a containment grid around the entire solar system, invisible walls of energy that would destroy any human ship trying to leave. They placed monitoring stations around the outer planets. They sent a simple message to Earth: stay in your cage or die. For the first 50 years, humanity tried to fight. They sent ships against the containment grid. Every single one was destroyed. They tried to negotiate. The assembly refused to talk. They tried to hide ships and sneak through. The aliens found them every time. Slowly, the fighting stopped. The protests ended. The world governments told their people to accept their fate. Humanity would live and die in its solar system, forever trapped while other species explored the infinite universe. But some people refused to give up. Park's grandfather was one of them. He joined a secret group of scientists, engineers, and military officers who had a different plan. They would not fight the containment grid. They would not try to negotiate. Instead, they would wait. They would hide, and they would build. Deep beneath the surface of Mars, they carved out their first hidden shipyard. Inside hollowed asteroids, they constructed research facilities. In the frozen oceans of Europa, they tested weapons that the galaxy had never seen. Everything was done in secret. Everything was hidden from the alien sensors that watched them constantly. Generations passed. Grandfathers taught fathers. Fathers taught sons. The secret was passed down through families who dedicated their entire lives to one goal: freedom. Park joined the United Earth Navy when he was 18 years old. Like his father and grandfather before him, he trained in hidden facilities that officially did not exist. He learned to fly ships that the world's governments pretended they had never built. He studied alien tactics from battles that had happened thousands of years before humans existed. Now he was 63 years old, and he was about to do something that no human had done in 3 centuries. He was going to leave the solar system. The Admiral stood on the bridge of the Eternal Dawn, the flagship of humanity's secret fleet. Through the massive viewport, he could see them. 12,000 warships, hidden for generations, now gathered together for the first time. Carriers the size of small cities, destroyers that could move faster than anything the aliens had ever built. Battlecruisers bristling with weapons that would make the Assembly's technology look like toys. And the dreadnoughts, 7 of them. Each one 3 kilometers long, built from metals that humanity had invented in secret laboratories. Their main weapons could create tiny black holes that would tear through enemy formations like paper. Captain walked up beside the Admiral. She was 42 years old with short black hair and eyes that had seen too much training and not enough real sky. Like everyone in the fleet, she had never felt sunlight on her face without the shimmer of the containment field above it. "All ships report ready, Admiral," she said. Her voice was calm, but Park could see the slight trembling in her hands. This was the moment they had all trained their entire lives for. "How are the crews?" he asked. Nervous, excited, ready. She paused. Some of the younger officers were crying earlier. They said they never really believed this day would come. Park nodded slowly. He understood that feeling. For 300 years, the dream of freedom had been passed down through generations. Parents had told their children. Teachers had whispered to students. Everyone knew the plan, but after so long, many had started to wonder if it was just a story, a fairy tale to make the cage feel less permanent. But it was real. All of it was real. Lieutenant Commander, the ship's communication officer, spoke up from her station. Admiral, we're receiving final status reports from all fleet divisions. Destroyer wings are in position. Carrier groups have launched their fighter screens. The dreadnoughts are fully powered. What about the containment grid? Park asked. Still active. The aliens haven't detected our gathering. Their monitoring stations are reporting normal activity throughout the inner system. Park allowed himself a small smile. The assembly had grown comfortable over 3 centuries. They checked their sensors every day and saw the same thing, a primitive species trapped in its cage, going about its meaningless existence. They had stopped really watching a long time ago. That was their mistake. Commander O appeared on one of the bridge screens. He was a younger man, barely 35, who led the destroyer wing. His family had been shipbuilders for 5 generations. Admiral, my ships are ready. The crews wanted me to tell you something. What is it, Commander? His eyes were bright with emotion. They said to tell you that their grandparents are watching, their great-grandparents, everyone who worked in those hidden shipyards, everyone who kept the secret, everyone who died believing that someday their children would be free. His voice cracked slightly. They're all watching today, sir, and they're proud. Park felt a lump form in his throat. He thought about his own grandfather, who had died 30 years ago without ever seeing the sun, without the containment field's shimmer. The old man had worked on the first prototype of the Eternal Dawn's engine. He had dedicated his entire life to a dream he knew he would never see completed. Tell your crews that we carry all of them with us, Park said. Every engineer who worked in secret, every scientist who hid their research, every parent who taught their children to never give up hope, we carry them all. He turned to face the main viewport. Somewhere out there, beyond the planets of his home system, was a galaxy that had tried to imprison his species forever. A galaxy that had murdered 14,000 innocent people just for dreaming of the stars. A galaxy that had looked at humanity and decided they were nothing more than dangerous animals to be caged. Today, that galaxy would learn the truth. All ships, Admiral Park said, his voice carrying across 12,000 vessels and 2 million crew members, prepare to break the containment grid. Prepare to enter the galaxy. He paused, letting the moment stretch out. Prepare to remind the universe why they feared us in the first place. The fleet began to move. Engines that had never been tested at full power roared to life. Ships that had never seen open space outside of simulation began their journey toward the edge of the solar system. 2 million humans who had lived their entire lives in a cage took their first step toward freedom. The containment grid waited ahead, invisible and deadly. Behind it, a galaxy that thought humanity was broken and tame. They were about to discover how wrong they were. Station Commander had served on the Neptune monitoring station for 47 years. In all that time, nothing interesting had ever happened. The humans stayed in their cage. The sensors showed the same boring readings every single day. Ships moved between Earth and Mars. Scientists poked around the moons of Jupiter. Nothing ever changed. He had requested a transfer 6 times. Each time, his superiors told him the same thing. The Neptune station was important. Someone had to watch the humans. Someone had to make sure they stayed contained. But after 47 years, had stopped really watching. He spent most of his time reviewing supply reports and complaining to his subordinates about the food shipments. The monitoring screens ran in the background, ignored by everyone. That was why he almost missed it. Commander, one of his officers burst into his private quarters, all 4 of his eyes wide with panic. The detection grid is showing movement, massive movement, from the inner system. Looked up from his meal with annoyance. Probably just another cargo convoy. The humans move resources between their planets all the time. No, sir, this is different. The readings are unlike anything we've ever seen. Thousands of contacts, moving in formation, heading directly toward us. For a long moment, just stared at him. Then he pushed himself up from his chair and followed the officer to the main control room. What he saw on the screens made his blood turn cold. Ships, thousands of ships. They were emerging from behind Jupiter's moons in perfect formation, but that was impossible. The humans had no ships. They had small transport vessels, research craft, mining equipment, nothing like this, nothing even close to this. Where did these come from? Whispered. We don't know, sir. Our sensors can't get clear readings. The hull material is absorbing our scans instead of reflecting them. We've never seen anything like it. Watched the fleet approach. Even from this distance, he could see the massive vessels at the center of the formation. They were enormous, bigger than any ship the assembly had ever built, and they were heading straight for his station. "Send a distress signal," he ordered. "Contact the assembly high command immediately. Tell them," he swallowed hard, "tell them the humans are coming." The transmission officer worked frantically at her console. "Signal sent, Commander. Message received by Assembly Headquarters." "How long until they can send reinforcements?" "At least 3 days, sir. Maybe 4. Looked at the approaching fleet. At their current speed, they would reach the station in less than an hour. "Activate all defense systems," he said. "Prepare for combat." His officers looked at him with fear in their eyes. The Neptune station had weapons, but they were old. They had never been fired in anger. Against a fleet this size, they might as well be throwing rocks. But what else could they do? Aboard the Eternal Dawn, Captain watched the alien station grow larger on her screen. She felt no sympathy for the creatures inside. Her grandmother had been on one of the colony ships that the aliens destroyed. 14,000 people, including 200 children, killed because they dared to dream of freedom. "The station is powering up weapons," Lieutenant Commander reported. "They've sent a distress signal to the assembly." Admiral Park nodded from his command chair. "Let them. By the time help arrives, there will be nothing left to save." He turned to the weapons officer. "Target the station. Fire when ready." The Eternal Dawn's main cannon was called the. It had been tested exactly once, deep in the asteroid belt where no alien sensors could detect it. The weapon had vaporized an asteroid 3 kilometers wide in less than a second. The Neptune station was much smaller than that asteroid. Commander never saw the shot that killed him. One moment, he was standing on his bridge, watching the human fleet approach. The next moment, he and his 300 crew members ceased to exist. The station didn't explode. It simply vanished, converted into atoms and scattered across space. "Station destroyed," the weapons officer reported calmly. "No survivors." Captain felt nothing. No guilt, no satisfaction, just a cold emptiness. This was only the beginning. There would be many more deaths before this was over. "All containment grid nodes are going offline," announced. The station was controlling the entire system. Without it, the grid has collapsed. Admiral Park stood and walked to the main viewport. For 300 years, an invisible wall had surrounded his home system. Now, for the first time since his grandfather was a young man, that wall was gone. "Signal all ships," he said quietly. "The cage is broken. Humanity is free." Across 12,000 vessels, the message spread. Crew members who had spent their entire lives preparing for this moment stopped what they were doing. Some of them cried. Some of them cheered. Some of them simply stood in silence, unable to believe that it was finally real. Commander O's voice came over the fleet-wide channel. "Admiral, the destroyer wing is ready to move. What are your orders?" "Form up around the dreadnoughts. We move to the junction at the edge of the system. From there, we jump to assembly space. And if we encounter resistance..." Park's eyes hardened. "Then we show them what 300 years of preparation looks like." The fleet began to move again, accelerating toward the edge of the solar system. Behind them, the wreckage of the Neptune station drifted through space, the first casualty of humanity's war for freedom. On the bridge of the Unbroken, one of the 7 dreadnoughts, Doctor watched the stars through the viewport. She was not a soldier. She was a scientist who had spent her entire career developing the technology that powered the fleet. The shield systems, the weapons, the engines that could outrun anything the assembly had ever built. Her assistant, a young man named Minu, stood beside her. "Do you think we can really win this?" he asked quietly. "The assembly has millions of ships. We have 12,000. Smiled slightly. "Numbers mean nothing against technology. The assembly has been using the same weapons for 1,000,000 years. Why would they change? They've never faced a real threat. They've never had to adapt or improve. And us? We've had 300 years with nothing to do but prepare for this exact moment. Every scientist in humanity has been working on one goal, defeating the assembly. Every engineer, every researcher, every brilliant mind we had all focused on the same enemy. She looked at the young man. "Do you know what happens when you lock a species in a cage and give them 3 centuries to build weapons?" Minyu shook his head. "You create the most dangerous force the galaxy has ever seen." The fleet reached the junction 6 hours later. This was the point where normal space connected to the network of faster-than-light travel lanes that crisscrossed the galaxy. For 300 years, no human ship had been able to reach this point. The containment grid had stopped them all. Now, for the first time, humanity was about to use the Admiral Park addressed the fleet one final time before the jump. 300 years ago, they killed our people for wanting to see the stars. They locked us in our own solar system and told us we were too dangerous to be free. They thought they had broken us. They thought they had won. He paused, letting his words sink in. They were wrong. We didn't break. We didn't give up. We waited. We prepared. And now we're coming for them. The Admiral's voice grew harder. In the next few days, we will face the combined military might of 12 alien species. They will outnumber us. They will tell us to surrender. They will threaten us with destruction. A cold smile crossed his face. Let them threaten. Let them send their millions of ships. We will show them what humanity is capable of. We will show them why they were right to be afraid. All ships, prepare to jump. 12,000 vessels activated their hyperdrive engines simultaneously. For a brief moment, space itself seemed to twist and bend around the fleet. Then, in a flash of light that lit up the outer solar system like a second sun, the fleet vanished. For the first time in 300 years, humans had left their cage. The galaxy was about to discover what that meant. The high chamber of the Galactic Assembly had not seen an emergency session in 200 years. There had been no need. The 12 elder species had divided the galaxy among themselves long ago. Wars were rare. Disputes were settled through negotiation. Peace had reigned for so long that most species had forgotten what real conflict looked like. That peace was about to end. Ambassador of the Dominion stood at the center of the great chamber, his insect-like body trembling with barely contained fear. Around him, representatives of the other 11 elder species watched from their elevated platforms. The crystalline, the massive four-legged, the slender, ghostly Etherian, all of them waiting to hear what had happened at the Neptune station. 3 hours ago, began, his mandibles clicking nervously, we lost contact with our monitoring station in the human system. When we tried to restore communication, we discovered. He paused, struggling to find the words. We discovered that the station no longer exists. Murmurs spread through the chamber. The monitoring station had been there for 3 centuries. It was supposed to be permanent. Destroyed by what? Demanded Warlord, his deep voice echoing off the chamber walls. An asteroid, a malfunction. No, Warlord. It was destroyed by human weapons. Silence fell over the chamber. The elder species stared at as if he had lost his mind. Impossible, said the representative, her crystalline form flickering with confusion. The humans have no weapons capable of threatening a military installation. They have no fleet. They have nothing. With respect, replied, that is what we believed. We were wrong. He activated a holographic display that showed the last images captured by the station's sensors before its destruction. These are the ships that attacked us. The chamber fell completely silent. The display showed thousands of vessels moving in perfect formation. Massive warships of unknown design, technology that none of the elder species had ever seen. A fleet that should not exist, built by a species that should have had nothing. Where did these come from? Whispered the Etherian delegate. How could they have built this without our knowledge? We don't know, admitted. Our sensors were unable to scan their vessels. Whatever materials they used, whatever technology powers their ships, it is completely unknown to us. Warlord slammed his massive fist against his platform. This changes nothing. They may have surprised us with a few hidden ships, but they are still just humans. We outnumber them millions to 1. We will send our combined fleet to their system and destroy every last one of them. The humans are no longer in their system, Warlord. His eyes narrowed. What? They broke through the containment grid and entered the network. According to our latest tracking data, his voice shook. They are heading directly for Nexus Prime. Nexus Prime, the capital world of the Galactic Assembly, the heart of their civilization, the most heavily defended planet in the galaxy. How long until they arrive? Asked the representative. Approximately 70 hours. Panic erupted in the chamber. Representatives shouted over each other. Some demanded immediate military action. Others called for evacuation. The careful order that had ruled the assembly for millions of years crumbled in moments. Then every screen in the chamber went dark. The shouting stopped. The representatives looked around in confusion. Their communication devices were no longer working. Their data tablets showed nothing but static. Even the great holographic display at the center of the chamber had gone blank. Then a face appeared on every screen, a human face, old, weathered, with eyes that held no fear and no mercy. "I am Admiral Park of the United Earth Navy," the human said. His voice was calm, almost gentle. "I am broadcasting this message to every world, every station, and every ship in assembly space. You will all hear what I have to say." In the chamber, the elder species watched in stunned silence. On 10,000 worlds across the galaxy, billions of beings stopped what they were doing and stared at the screens that had been taken over by this unknown signal. "For 300 years you caged us. You murdered our colonists, 14,000 innocent people who only wanted to see the stars. You told us we were too violent, too dangerous, too primitive to walk among you." The Admiral paused, and something cold entered his eyes. "You were right about one thing. We are dangerous. You saw what we could become, and you tried to stop us. But you made a mistake. You left us alive. You gave us a reason to fight, and you gave us 300 years to prepare." On the bridge of the Eternal Dawn, Captain watched the Admiral deliver his message. Around her, the crew worked in focused silence. They all knew what was coming. They all knew that there would be no going back after this. "In 72 hours, Admiral Park continued, our fleet will arrive at Nexus Prime. When we do, you will dismantle the Galactic Assembly. You will release all records of human imprisonment. You will open all to human vessels. And you will answer for what you did to our people." He leaned forward, his voice dropping to barely more than a whisper. "If you refuse, if you fight, we will not negotiate. We will not accept surrender. We will reduce your worlds to ash and salt your stars. Every species that voted to cage humanity will learn what it means to face us in war." In the high chamber, Warlord watched with fury burning in his eyes. The other representatives looked terrified, but the leader refused to show fear. His species had conquered 3 star clusters. They had never lost a war. They would not start now. "This is your only warning," the Admiral said. "Choose wisely." The screens went dark again. Normal communications slowly returned. But no one in the chamber spoke for a long moment. Finally, broke the silence. "We will not be threatened by animals," he growled. "Every species in this assembly will contribute their full military forces. We will meet these humans at Nexus Prime with a fleet larger than anything the galaxy has ever seen. And we will crush them so completely that the universe will forget they ever existed. The humans fought each other for their entire history," he continued. "They killed millions of their own kind in their pathetic little wars, but they have never faced a real enemy. They have never faced us." He looked around the chamber. "We are the masters of this galaxy. We have ruled for 1,000,000 years. We will not bow to these primitives." The representative spoke hesitantly. "Warlord, perhaps we should consider." "Consider what? Surrender? Negotiation?" His laugh was harsh and cruel. "They are bluffing. They have a few thousand ships. We have millions. This will not be a battle. It will be an extermination." Ambassador wanted to argue. He had seen the sensor readings from the Neptune station. He had seen how easily those unknown ships had destroyed a facility that should have been invincible. But looking around the chamber, he saw that the other species were already agreeing with. Their fear was turning to anger. Their shock was becoming determination. They wanted to believe that they could still win. They wanted to believe that the humans were bluffing. Hoped they were right, but deep in his heart, he was afraid that they were very, very wrong. Across the galaxy, the assembly began to mobilize. Every species sent their warships toward Nexus Prime. Fighters, destroyers, battle cruisers, massive carrier vessels that held hundreds of smaller craft. The filled with military traffic as the greatest fleet in galactic history assembled to meet the human threat. 8 million ships in total. The combined might of 12 species that had ruled the stars for longer than humanity had existed. Aboard the Eternal Dawn, Admiral Park reviewed the intelligence reports with Captain and Doctor. "They're gathering everything they have," observed. 8 million ships against our 12,000. Those are not good odds." "Odds mean nothing," replied. "Their technology is ancient. They've been using the same weapons, the same tactics, the same ships for millions of years. Why would they change? They've never faced anything that required adaptation." "And we have?" asked. Park smiled grimly. "We've done nothing but adapt for 300 years. Every scientist we had worked on weapons to defeat them. Every tactician studied their battles. Every engineer designed ships to counter their technology." He looked at the display showing the approaching alien fleet. "They think they know what war looks like. They have no idea what we've prepared for them." "Still," said quietly, 8 million ships is a lot of enemies." "Yes, it is," Park nodded slowly. "But we're not going to fight them ship to ship. We're going to break them in one battle, so completely that they never recover." He turned to face his officers. "They want to see what humanity is capable of. In 72 hours, we're going to show them." Nexus Prime hung in space like a jewel. The capital world of the Galactic Assembly was a planet of endless cities, home to billions of beings from all 12 elder species. For 1 million years, it had been the center of galactic civilization. No enemy had ever threatened it. No fleet had ever dared to approach. Until now, the Assembly's combined fleet surrounded the planet in a defensive formation that stretched for thousands of kilometers. 8 million ships, fighters, destroyers, cruisers, and battleships, the greatest military force ever assembled in the history of the galaxy. Their commanders were confident. Their crews were ready. They would crush the human threat and end this foolish rebellion before it truly began. Warlord stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Dreadnought. He had commanded this vessel for 200 years and had never lost a battle. Today would be no different. "Status report," he ordered. "All fleet elements are in position, Warlord," his tactical officer replied. "The enforcers are holding the outer perimeter. Etherian ships are running sensor sweeps. Our main battle line is ready to engage." Nodded with satisfaction. He had positioned his forces perfectly. When the humans arrived, they would face a wall of firepower that no fleet could survive. Their few thousand ships would be torn apart in minutes. "The humans should be entering the system any moment now," the tactical officer continued. "Sensors are detecting hyperspace distortions at the edge of the—" He stopped mid-sentence. His face went pale. "Warlord, they're here!" The human fleet dropped out of hyperspace in perfect synchronization. 12,000 ships appeared as one, their formation so precise that it looked like a single massive organism. At the center stood the 7 dreadnoughts, their dark hulls absorbing light rather than reflecting it. Around them, the carriers, destroyers, and battlecruisers took their positions with mechanical perfection. On the Eternal Dawn, Admiral Park studied the enemy formation. Captain stood beside him, her face calm despite the impossible odds they faced. 8 million ships, she said quietly. "Even more than we expected." "Yes," Park nodded slowly. "They brought everything. Good. That means we can end this in one battle." Lieutenant Commander spoke up from her station. "Admiral, the enemy fleet is beginning to power weapons. They're preparing to fire." "Let them fire first," Park said. "I want them to see what happens to their weapons." Across the void, Warlord gave the order that would begin the battle. "All ships, open fire." 8 million vessels unleashed their weapons simultaneously. Plasma bolts, missile salvos, directed energy beams, a wall of destruction that lit up space like a second sun. The attack was so massive that it should have overwhelmed any defense. It should have vaporized the human fleet in seconds. It did nothing. On the Eternal Dawn, the ship's artificial intelligence system calmly reported, "Enemy fire incoming. Time to impact, 14 seconds. All ships," Admiral Park ordered, "activate Veil Protocol." Across the human fleet, experimental shield systems came online. These shields had been designed over 3 centuries by the greatest minds humanity had ever produced. They didn't simply block enemy fire, they absorbed it. The wall of destruction slammed into the human fleet and vanished. Energy readings across every human ship spiked as they converted enemy weapons' fire into additional power. The attack that should have destroyed them instead made them stronger. In the assembly fleet, sensor officers stared at their screens in disbelief. "Warlord," the tactical officer said, his voice shaking, "our attack had no effect. Their shields absorbed everything. Energy readings on their ships are increasing. They're using our own weapons' fire as fuel." His eyes widened. "Impossible! No technology can do that." "Theirs can." On the Eternal Dawn, Admiral Park gave his next order. "Return fire. Dreadnoughts target the enemy center. Singularity cannons, fire." The 7 dreadnoughts fired as one. Their main weapons were called singularity cannons, devices that could create microscopic black holes that existed for exactly 0.003 seconds. In that tiny fraction of time, the black holes tore through everything in their path. 7 beams of absolute destruction lanced out from the human fleet. They struck the center of the assembly formation and kept going. For 300 kilometers, ships simply ceased to exist, not destroyed, not exploded, simply erased from reality. In 4 seconds, the assembly lost 200,000 ships. Silence fell across the battlefield. The elder species had never seen anything like this. They had never imagined anything like this. Their confident formations began to waver as commanders tried to understand what had just happened. "Commander O, seize the moment. Destroyer wing, engage. Push into their center while they're confused." His ships surged forward, moving faster than anything the assembly had ever built. The destroyers were designed for close-range combat, where the enemy's larger ships couldn't maneuver effectively. They dove into the gaps created by the dreadnought's attack and began tearing through enemy formations from the inside. His voice echoed across his wing's communication channel. "Remember what they did to us. Remember the burning. Remember 300 years of imprisonment. Today, we take it all back." His crews needed no further motivation. They had waited their entire lives for this moment. Their parents and grandparents had died dreaming of this day. Every pilot, every gunner, every officer fought with a fury that the assembly had never encountered. On the Warlord watched his fleet crumble. Ships were dying by the thousands. His carefully planned formation was falling apart. For the first time in his 200 years of command, he felt something he had never experienced before. "Fear! All ships pull back," he ordered. "Regroup at the secondary defensive line." But his orders came too late. The human fleet was already among them, their weapons tearing through assembly ships with terrifying efficiency. The carriers launched swarms of fighters that moved in coordination patterns no alien pilot could match. The battlecruisers fired weapons that bypassed enemy shields entirely, striking directly at reactor cores and engine systems. And the dreadnoughts kept firing. Again and again, their singularity cannons carved holes through the assembly formation. Each shot destroyed tens of thousands of ships. Each attack pushed the enemy closer to total collapse. Captain coordinated the battle from the Eternal Dawn's bridge, her voice calm and steady as she directed fleet movements. Carrier Group Alpha pushed the left flank. Destroyer Wing Beta cut off their retreat vector. Dreadnought Invincible target that cluster of battleships. Doctor watched from the observation deck, her heart pounding. Beside her, her young assistant Minu stared at the battlefield in awe. "The simulations were right," said quietly. "Our technology is centuries ahead of theirs, maybe more." "How is that possible?" Minu asked. "They've been spacefaring for 1,000,000 years. We've only been building ships for 300. "Because we had something they never had," replied. "A reason to improve, a goal to work toward. They built their weapons to fight each other and then they stopped fighting. They stopped advancing. They got comfortable." She watched another wave of singularity cannon fire erase a portion of the enemy fleet. "We never stopped. We couldn't afford to." The battle raged for 6 hours, but it wasn't really a battle. It was a demonstration. The assembly threw everything they had at the human fleet, wave after wave of attacks, desperate suicide runs, attempts to flank, to overwhelm, to find any weakness. Nothing worked. The human shields absorbed every attack. The human weapons destroyed everything they touched. 4 million assembly ships were destroyed. 3 million more fled into hyperspace, their crews abandoning the battle in terror. The rest surrendered, their commanders realizing that continued resistance meant only death. When it was over, Admiral Park reviewed the casualty reports. 847 ships lost, Captain read. 31,000 personnel. Most of those were from the destroyer wings push into the enemy center. Park closed his eyes for a moment. Every loss was a tragedy. Every death was someone's child, someone's parent, someone's friend. But they had known the cost would be high. They had known that freedom would require sacrifice. "What about the enemy?" he asked. "Over 4 million ships destroyed, 3 million in retreat, 1 million surrendered." Paused. Warlord's flagship was among those destroyed. He refused to surrender. Park nodded slowly. He felt no satisfaction in the enemy commander's death. This had never been about revenge. This was about survival, about freedom, about ensuring that no species would ever cage humanity again. "Signal the surviving assembly forces," he ordered. "Tell them to stand down. Any ship that continues to resist will be destroyed. Any ship that cooperates will be spared." He turned to look out the viewport at the planet of Nexus Prime, the Assembly's capital world, the heart of their civilization, now completely defenseless. "And prepare my shuttle," he added. "It's time to deliver our terms in person." The high chamber of the Galactic Assembly looked very different from 3 days ago. The elevated platforms that had once held proud representatives of the 12 elder species were now occupied by beings who could barely meet each other's eyes. Their fleets were destroyed. Their military power was broken. And standing at the center of the chamber was the human who had done it all. Admiral Park walked slowly across the floor, his boots echoing in the silent space. Behind him, Captain and a squad of human soldiers stood in perfect formation. They carried no weapons. They didn't need to. Everyone in the chamber had seen what human technology could do. Ambassador of the was the first to speak. His mandibles trembled as he stepped forward and lowered himself to the ground before the Admiral. "On behalf of the Dominion," he said, his voice barely above a whisper, "I offer our complete surrender. We accept whatever terms you choose to give us." One by one, the other representatives did the same. The crystalline knelt, the ghostly Etherian bowed. Even the proud, who had boasted so loudly about crushing the human fleet, lowered themselves before their conqueror. Only then did Admiral Park speak. 300 years ago, he said, his voice carrying to every corner of the chamber, "this assembly voted to imprison my species. You murdered 14,000 innocent people. You caged our children. You told us that we were too dangerous to walk among the stars." He paused, letting the silence stretch. "You were right about one thing. We are dangerous. You saw what we could become, and you tried to stop us." His eyes swept across the assembled aliens. "But you made a mistake. You left us alive. You gave us a reason to fight, and you gave us 300 years to prepare." Spoke up hesitantly. We did not know. We could not have predicted that you would." "You predicted exactly this," Park interrupted. "That's why you caged us. You saw our potential. You feared what we might become if we were free." He stepped closer to the kneeling ambassador. "And now we have become exactly that." The chamber was completely silent. Every alien present waited to hear their fate. Would the humans do to them what they had done to humanity? Would they be imprisoned, killed, or worse? "We're not going to do to you what you did to us," Park said. Relief flickered across alien faces. "We're not going to cage your children. We're not going to imprison your species. We're not going to murder your colonists." Looked up with something like hope in his eyes. "Then, what do you want from us?" Park smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "We want you to watch." The Admiral turned and began to pace slowly across the chamber. "You're going to watch humanity spread across every corner of this galaxy. You're going to see us build colonies on worlds that your species never bothered to explore. You're going to watch us develop technology that makes your civilizations look like they're standing still." He stopped and faced the assembly again. "You're going to see us become everything you tried to prevent. And every time you look at the stars, you're going to remember that you could have been our allies. You could have welcomed us as equals. You could have shared the galaxy with a species that had so much to offer." His voice hardened. "Instead, you made us your conquerors." The surrender was signed that same day. The Galactic Assembly was dissolved. In its place, the Terran hegemony was established, with humanity at its head. The 12 elder species were not enslaved or destroyed. They were allowed to govern their own worlds, maintain their own cultures, and live their own lives. But they did so under human authority. Human ships patrolled the human governors oversaw disputed territories. Human technology began to spread throughout the galaxy, improving the lives of billions of beings who had never even heard of Earth. In the weeks that followed, occupation forces landed on the former assembly worlds. They were met not with resistance, but with resignation. The elder species had seen what humanity could do. They had no desire to experience it again. Captain commanded the garrison at Nexus Prime. It was strange, she thought, to walk through the streets of an alien city that had once been the heart of the civilization that imprisoned her ancestors. The who passed her on the streets looked away quickly, afraid to meet her eyes. She didn't feel triumphant. She didn't feel satisfied. She felt tired. The war was over, but the work of building a new galaxy had just begun. Doctor arrived at Nexus Prime 2 weeks after the battle. She had been assigned to lead a research team studying alien technology. Not to steal it, human technology was already superior, but to understand it. To find ways that humanity and the elder species could work together. It's strange, she told Captain over dinner. They've been using the same basic technologies for millions of years. No innovation, no advancement. They just stopped. Why? Asked. Because they had no reason to continue. They had defeated every enemy. They had conquered every challenge. There was nothing left to push them forward, shook her head. They became stagnant, comfortable, and she smiled slightly. We had 300 years in a cage with nothing to do but think about how to escape. Nodded slowly. My grandmother was on one of the colony ships they destroyed. She never got to see the stars, but she had a daughter, and that daughter had me, and now I'm here. 3 generations of sacrifice, said, all leading to this moment. Was it worth it? Looked out the window at the alien city below. Ships were moving through the sky, some human, some alien, all part of the new order that was being built. Ask me again in 50 years, she said. If we've made something good out of all this death, then yes, it was worth it. 50 years passed. Doctor was an old woman now. She stood on the observation deck of Nexus Station, watching human and alien vessels pass through the junction. So much had changed since the liberation. Humanity had expanded to 700 colony worlds. Human technology had revolutionized galactic civilization. Human art, music, and philosophy had spread to every corner of known space. The elder species had adapted to the new reality. Some had embraced humanity's energy and innovation, becoming valued partners in building the new galactic order. Others had withdrawn to preferring to preserve their ancient ways. A few still harbored resentment, but they kept it quiet. They remembered what had happened to those who challenged humanity. His granddaughter, a girl named, stood beside her at the viewport. She was 12 years old and had never known a galaxy where humanity was caged. To her, the stars had always been open. Grandma said, "Is it true that humans used to be prisoners?" Smiled at the question. She had told her granddaughter the stories many times, but children always wanted to hear them again. Yes, sweetheart, a long time ago, before your mother was born, humans were not allowed to leave our solar system. The aliens who ruled the galaxy kept us trapped there. But why? We're not bad. No, we're not bad, put her arm around her granddaughter. But we are different. Other species, when they face impossible situations, they accept them. They adapt to their circumstances and learn to live within limits. Humans don't do that. What do we do? Thought about Admiral Park, who had died 15 years ago as a hero of the hegemony. She thought about Captain, who now commanded the largest fleet in galactic history. She thought about her own parents, who had worked in secret laboratories their entire lives, building weapons they hoped they would never have to use. We refuse to give up, she said. No matter how long it takes, no matter what we have to sacrifice, we never stop fighting for what we believe in. The aliens looked at us and saw a species that could not be controlled. That scared them. Considered this. So they locked us up because they were scared of us. They locked us up because they looked at us and saw what we could become, and they were right to be afraid. Watched a human colony ship, one of dozens that departed every day, accelerate toward They just didn't understand how patient we could be. In the years that followed, humanity continued to grow. New colonies were founded. New technologies were developed. The former assembly species slowly integrated into human civilization, their cultures and knowledge becoming part of a greater whole. There were still challenges, still conflicts, still moments when it seemed like the galaxy might tear itself apart. But humanity faced each challenge the same way they had faced the containment grid, with determination, patience, and an absolute refusal to surrender. Admiral Park's final message, delivered to the fleet before the Battle of Nexus Prime, became humanity's creed. It was taught in schools across 700 worlds. It was inscribed on monuments and repeated in ceremonies. They feared our violence, so they gave us centuries to refine it. They feared our ambition, so they gave us a reason to dream bigger. They feared what we might become, and we became exactly that. The galaxy had trembled at humanity's arrival. Now it learned to call them leaders, and deep in the heart of every human, from the oldest veteran of the liberation to the youngest child born on a distant colony world, burned the same fire that had sustained their ancestors through 300 years of imprisonment. The fire of freedom, the fire that would never go out.